Hey, everybody. So my name is Danielle Kaminski. I am the host here at the Makers Chat podcast. And as of this week, we are adding a new segment here on the YouTube channel called Makers Create Live. So tonight you get me, but starting next week, we have some really great creatives who have joined us on the podcast who are going to be here to show you what they do. So on the podcast, of course, you guys know, we talk about maker related topics. We get to hear their stories of how they started their business, how they came about doing their craft, but we don't get to always see them doing their craft, right? We'll share some images sometimes when we're here on the YouTube channel. Of course, you can see some of the pictures of their work, but you're actually going to get the opportunity to see them create on this Tuesday night segment. So starting tonight, every Tuesday at 8 p.m., we'll be here live and we'll be joined by different guests, different creatives. So next week, we're going to have Michelle Allen. The week after that, we'll be talking with Renee Smith. And then Greta Gimond and Amy Sadler will also be joining us in the coming weeks. So we'll have different folks here joining us each Tuesday night at 8. And I'm really excited for you to get to know them in a different way, get to know them as creatives, not just business owners and not just talking about the businessy things. So tonight for this first one, you get me, and I am pulling up the comments or pulling up the video, I guess I should say, so that if you guys do have comments or questions while we're here live, hopefully I'll be able to see those and answer them. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my craft. So I'm on all of the episodes, of course, but hopefully I'm shining a light on everyone else because that is the goal of the podcast, is for you to get to know our guest. I have told my story a few times, especially early on, but I started creating 12 years ago now, back in 2010. And I was I've been creating my whole life, but I first started creating things to sell in 2010. And I started out with jewelry and crocheted blankets. So one of the first crafts that I ever really did was crocheting and fiber arts. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I actually figured out ways to incorporate that into some of my jewelry making at different points, especially with wire and different things like that. But jewelry was my primary craft, was the primary thing in my business for years. And then in 2014, I added candles. I added soy candles to the products that I created. And there's a whole fun story behind that. And in 2018, I started painting. So I am what we like to call a multi-passionate creator. I have a hard time focusing on any one thing, especially now that I'm doing this for a living and I get to do it full time. I can't focus on just one little thing. I just can't do it. But in 2020, I started weaving and I love it. And that's what I'm going to share with you guys tonight. I've figured out different ways to incorporate that into my jewelry. I've also figured out how to incorporate that onto canvas painting. I've been playing with ways to incorporate it into furniture. I really, really love weaving. And so that's what I'll share with you guys tonight. So when I was deciding what project I was going to work on, I started with this particular idea. So this is a weaving that I have been working on because recently on my own Facebook page, I go live every Thursday night. And I created a really fun round weaving. It's part of a new series. And I was using the black and the green like that. And I really loved the idea of a little pop of color inside of a canvas that was mostly black. And so I prepped a couple of round weavings, this being one of them. So this is just a little 8-inch round hoop that I wrapped with some black cord and then used the cotton warp thread to go ahead and warp it. So I did that part because that takes about, I don't know, for something this size, that maybe takes me about 15 or 20 minutes and it's kind of repetitive. So I thought you probably wouldn't want to watch me do that. But I have lots of different black textured yarns here, which is mostly what we're going to be using in this piece. But also I have this really cool art yarn from Loom Denim. And it's a 2-ply. And what she does is she takes all these fun scrappy pieces and she adds them with black yarn to create this really fun scrappy yarn. So I'm going to turn my camera down and talk to you guys a little bit about my creative process. That's what the next few weeks are going to be when we bring our guests on here. I'm going to be asking them how they choose colors, how they get started on their projects. Do they ever reach a point where they just don't feel like creating? So if you guys have questions, if you're watching live, I would love for you to drop them in the comments. If you're not watching live, I would still love for you to drop them in the comments. I'd be happy to come back and answer them later. But I'm going to turn my camera down so that you can sort of watch me work on this project. It's a pretty small piece. So I'm going to see if I can't get it finished up. It's 8:05 right now. And my plan was to be on here anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes with you guys. So we'll test my speed here tonight and see how fast I can do this. Okay. All right. So let's just go ahead and face this camera down. Normally, you won't see the area that you won't see the table in front of me like this because I'll be talking with our guests. And so I will have them put their camera on what they're working on to talk to you about their process, but you will just see my face in a little corner and I'll be asking them questions as we go. So I'm using several different fibers tonight and I thought I would show you. I've got some just plain black cotton cord. This is like a macrame cord, and it's all cotton. I've also got some thick, thin, one-ply wool that I'm going to use. I have this worsted yarn that's got a twisted ply to it. I've got some black chiffon here. I've got a different kind of wool. This is just a one-ply. It's really basic. And then I've got just a couple of little skinny different ones here. Again, just different sizes of wool. I have this kind of thin chenille bit right here. And then I've got some black cotton frizz. I already showed you this fun 2-ply art yarn. And then in case I decided I wanted to use it, I went ahead and grabbed this. It actually looks like this might be a core spun. This is also from Loom Denim, but it's a scrappy all black piece. So I am going to get started. When I'm picking colors like this, sometimes I have a photo or something that I'm working from in my mind. Sometimes I just look at what is in my stash and go from there. Like a lot of creatives, if I just want to do something and I don't necessarily have a project in mind, I just walk into the craft room and see what's available to me. But sometimes, like today, I knew I had been working on that other piece that was black with the pops of green, and I really, really liked it. But I didn't necessarily want to work on that weaving because I wanted to try to do more of a complete project. And I figured since this was a kickoff party, right? It was our first night. We were celebrating that it would be a really fun time to use this fun fiber. So this is going to be, like I said, a mostly black piece. Just I like to create lots of texture basically in anything that I'm doing. If my customer or the person who's, looking at my work wants to reach out and touch it, then I feel like I've done my job correctly. I really, really love pieces that have a lot of texture. So I'm going to get started with a stitch it's Raya loops is what it is, but it's making loops by making knots. People do it in a couple of different ways. I'm not necessarily trying to teach you how to do this, but this is one of my favorite ways. I'm just creating some loops here in the center of the piece. A lot of times what you do in the center of a round weaving like this ends up being not necessarily the focus of what you're doing, but something that, it depends. If you do a really flat piece here in the center, then it can get covered up if you're doing a lot of texture. But if you end up doing a whole lot of something like this, that's going to be big and bulky in the center, then it might take up too much. It might take too much attention. So I like to start with something that can be relatively small so that as I work my way through the piece, I can decide if it's going to be the focus or if it's just going to be something that I build around. People weave in a lot of different ways. Some people with a round weaving will start on the outside and work their way in, or they'll start at the bottom and work their way up. I've done both. If I know it's going to be a very fringy piece, and I'm going to want a lot of fringe hanging outside of my round, then very often I will start with that. And then I will use the fibers in my fringe to sort of direct the rest of the piece. But I don't want this one to have a lot of fringe. I want this one to be pretty contained. So when I'm doing that, I tend to start in the center. Again, it's all design choices, right? And that's the whole point of this, is for you to get an opportunity to meet different creatives and hear about how they make their design choices. I don't want that to get too big. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that. And then I'm going to weave it back and tuck that too. All right. So I'm going to go ahead right here near the center and add my first bit of this fun art yarn, because I do want it to be the star of the show. I don't want to do loops though, because I don't want to do the same thing that I just did. I like to, that's one thing that I really like to do. I like to create the different textures next to one another and really allow them to sort of highlight each other because of the contrast, if that makes any sense. So this piece that I just trimmed, I'm going to actually do a sumac stitch, which is the braided woven stitch, and create some big loops so that hopefully this yarn will really show itself off in this process. So I can see what I'm working on a little better. And when you're working with art yarns, excuse me, because of the way that they're done at the ends, oftentimes it's easy for your things to start to want to spin apart. So you just have to kind of be careful with that. This one was actually applied very well because when I cut it, it didn't want to unravel at all. Weaving has always been a very meditative process for me. So I have a tendency, I can get very quiet when I'm weaving. It becomes a pattern and I am sort of thinking about what I'm going to do next, but my brain can also really wander in just all kinds of directions. Might be thinking about the day I had, might be thinking about, what I want to do next. Very often my ideas for weaving projects come before I'm finished with my current project. So while I'm weaving this, I may get an idea that doesn't work for this piece, but that I decide is actually going to work really well for my next piece. I'm just going to tuck that in between my rows and down. And this particular yarn has some extra little frays there, and I'm going to go ahead and snip those just so they don't get lost. The really cool thing about these scrappy art yarns is that they're going to have all kinds of little scraps that are just popping out and making all sorts of really cool texture. So next, let's go in this direction. And I want to do some fringe. I really love things that look like they're just wanting to pop out. Like I said, texture is my thing. I really love to watch other weavers though in their whole process, especially if they are more precise. It's, like I said, it's very meditative. It's so fun to watch. If you do join live and you have any questions, I would love for you to drop those in the comments. But if you're watching the replay, you can always leave questions in the comments and we'll come back. This is the first night of our Makers Create Live segment. So as a part of the Makers Chat podcast here on YouTube, we're going to add a 8 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday night. And I will be here after tonight. I will be here with other creatives. Tonight, you just get me telling you what to expect and sort of show them what I do, because why not, right? But like I said, in the future on Tuesday nights, it'll be different podcast guests that'll be here to show you how they create and what they create. We do a lot of talking, obviously, in the podcast segments, but this will be an opportunity for you to actually get to watch their process and see more of what they do. I have never broadcast from Zoom like this before. And so far, it seems to be relatively easy. But if I were to have any technical difficulties, I apologize in advance. Anytime you're doing something for the first time, there's always that chance that something will go sideways, right? I'm going to scroll down here just to make sure there's any comments. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Michelle Allen of Michelle Bell Creations. She is a furniture and canvas artist, and she really loves mixed media, so I can't wait to see what she's going to be working on. And of course, if you're a regular podcast subscriber, keep your eyes out tomorrow morning. This week's episode is with Renee Smith of Rain Gardens and Rainy Day Vintage, and she has a new business called RDV Prints, and we're going to be talking all about how she got started. And I can't wait for you guys to hear more of her story. Okay. I mentioned earlier, we're sort of testing my speed tonight, because I started a new project because I wanted to use this fun art yarn. And I wanted to use it and then just a bunch of different black textured yarns. And we're going to see how much I can get done on this small 8-inch weaving. Normally, this is the kind of thing, I don't do a lot of 8-inch weavings to sell. When I first started weaving in 2020, I actually was doing it as something, honestly, just something for me. You know, when you're a creative, it's very, very easy when you own a creative business to get wrapped up in the things that you make to sell, and you forget to make the things that just make your heart happy. So in 2020, when I first discovered weaving, I decided that I was going to just do this for me. I wasn't going to sell them. And you guys see how well that went. I loved it too much, basically, to not sell what I was doing, because otherwise I would just have way too many. I know that that's how most people get started in their creative crafting businesses, right? We can't keep it all. And we need to support our habits. So the other things that I create, I do love, and I set out to do those to make money, and I still do them. But weaving is weaving's a heart project, honestly. But anyway, I found Ashton Zager of Ashton Zager Fiber Arts. She has been on the podcast with us before and will be again, because she is a speaker at the Makers and Shakers Conference. It's happening this September here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. If you haven't already checked that out, you should head over to makersandshakersconference.com to get more details. But I found her, and she is also a weaver from Asheville, North Carolina. And she has these weaving kits that she sells. And they came with these round hoops, and you added your warp and everything, and then you wove directly on the hoop, and then you had something just to hang on the wall. So if you've ever watched one of my videos, well, if you've ever watched any of the videos on this channel, when I'm set up to do my podcast interviews, I'm in front of this wall that is just full of these small round weavings, because in 2020, most of the round weavings I kept, and they hang on my wall in my little work area where I do most of my videos. So I don't do very many of these small ones to sell. I have larger ones that I've made to sell. I do a lot of the weaving on canvas to sell, but most of these are generally for me. I have had some people express interest in them though, and I'm not willing to sell the ones on my wall because I said I wasn't going to. And so now I am starting to add some smaller round weavings every now and then that I can make to sell. So this is really only one of a handful that I've made this size with the intention of selling. But this is a really fun color scheme. I think it'll be great. I got to find the end here. This is what happens when you don't ball your yarn when you get a skein. I'm bad about that. I just work straight off of the skein instead of actually balling my yarn the way I should. And so then I'm hunting for the end. So this yarn that I am teasing out right now to find the end, this is a cotton frizz. I actually purchased this from a company called Merino Studio. Her name is Cindy. And this is just a really interesting, here we go, recycled fiber. And it is cotton that has been frayed out. And so you have all of these cotton fibers coming off of the main recycled piece. And it creates a really, really cool texture in a piece. So I want to create an area that's got a lower, not quite as raised texture, because that's kind of the point, right? You want to give it some depth and dimension. So when I'm working on a piece and I don't know how much I'm going to do, because I'm just going to kind of work with this until it looks the way I want it to look, I have a tendency to just be like, let's just measure out like maybe 4 lengths of the piece I'm working on, and we go from there. Like I said, I really love finding all of the different interesting pieces with different textures. Actually, recycled fabrics are one of my favorite things to weave with. And we started a project recently at my store that's like it's a community art project. And we got vintage sheets, and then the warehouse where my store is, it's an old textile mill. It hasn't been operational in years and years. But the folks who were there before us, when they left a whole lot of fabrics. So still on the bolt, just still up in the rafters, so to speak. And so we pulled a few of those down past few weeks and went through them and found some neutrals. And we've been cutting those fabrics into smaller pieces and asking people in our community to come in and write positive messages on the backs of these pieces of fabric. And then we have stripped them. We've cut them into strips the same way they do this cotton frizz. So there's a little bit of frizzing and fraying that happens around the edges, but it's really cool, and it turns it into something that we can weave with. And we're creating this huge 3 by 5 foot loom right in the front door of our store. And it's going to hang on the wall so that members of our community can come look at it anytime they want. And it will just be this really cool piece that all of our community infused with good vibes and thoughtful prayers and just, positive energy, basically, to hang in our store for hopefully years to come, right? I had someone come through on Saturday while we were working on that. And they're like, one day someone will pay thousands of dollars for that piece. I'm like, maybe someone local to the area will just really be like, I've got to have it. But mostly, we just wanted to create something really positive for the members of our community. Another cool thing with fabric like that is, since you can strip it into thin fabric strips to weave with, that means there's all kinds of really cool options for taking fabrics that have a lot of meaning to you. Maybe it was a piece of clothing that belonged to someone in your family that's not with you anymore. Maybe it is, some old bedding, even just from an old house or from a different period in your life or something that you want to remember. You can always turn those things into fabric strips and then incorporate them into weavings that you can then use for decor in your home. That would be the kind of thing that I love to do for like commissions. Someone's looking for a really meaningful gift or just a way to commemorate something using some kind of textile or fabric that means a lot to them. Okay, that's enough. Like I said, I want to get as many textures in this piece as I can. So I wanted a lower laying piece with still had a lot of, texture and interest. So that's why I did that. So I'm just going to bring this to the back and snip it. And when I'm done with my weaving, I'll clean up all these edges on the back. Okay, so now let's come over here on this side and do something interesting. Actually, let's see. So even though this is black, obviously different fibers take dyes very differently. So the wool clearly has just like soaked up that black dye, and it's the blackest area on here, where the cotton frizz didn't soak it up quite as well. So even though it's black, and it is truly black, it's not quite as deep. So what if we add a little charcoal to still just add more depth and dimension? Only this time, instead of simply texture, there's a depth of color. This is a section of, is this Merino? I'm trying to remember. Yes, this is a Merino wool roving that I purchased. And again, I'm pretty sure I bought this one from Cindy at Aroma Studios. Don't remember exactly which color this is. I believe it's the darkest gray you can get though. So probably graphite maybe. But I like to buy that roving and then section it into some skinnier pieces. It's combed top. That's not, well, I say that, pretty sure this one's combed top. When you buy roving, sometimes you get roving that has like a messier weave, and then sometimes you get the comb top, which is, yeah, it must be, because if I split it that way, it wouldn't have split so clean if it weren't. It's at least mostly combed. Depends on how the fibers lay. When you pull it apart like this, I actually was just watching a video recently to learn the difference, because I'm about to start, because like we said, I can't stop, right? I can't stop adding new things. I'm about to start learning how to spin some of my own yarns. So I was learning about roving and about the difference between roving and combed top. And this actually is at least partially combed, because most of the fibers are moving in the same direction. But the fluffier it is, meaning when you pull it apart like this, the more cobwebby it looks, the closer that is to just a true roving. And depending on how and what you are spinning, it can make a difference. So I learned something new this week, and I thought I'd share it with you. So I'm sort of doing a combination of what I call the loop stitches. So I started out doing like a sumac, but I was alternating whether I was pulling up or pulling down. And now I'm doing what I've always heard called as Egyptian knots, but is essentially just the reverse of that sumac stitch. All right, let's tuck this between our threads and pull it down behind. So now I've got a little section. This is more of a charcoal gray than a true black. All right. I actually had intended to put that over here, but that's fine. Let's add some chiffon. I said we were going to test my speed on this one. So when I got started at 8 o'clock, it had already been wrapped and warped. And so we are starting from the middle and working our way out, which does mean the outside takes a lot longer than the inside. And I was going to be on here anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes. So maybe another 10 to 15. Let's see how much we can get done. We'll have it more than half done, I think, by the time we're done. Okay. Again, most of these fibers apparently I bought from Naroma Studio. This is a chiffon ribbon. She has a lot of really great recycled fibers, which are just materials, right? Other kinds of materials that have been stripped to turn into something you can weave with. And so this is a chiffon ribbon. It's different from silk, of course, because it is chiffon, not silk. And a lot of times when I get these, the only reason I can tell the difference is because chiffon has stretch where silk doesn't really have any give. Hey, Sherry. Oh, I love that. See, the little mini weavings we make them to be ornaments. I make them to be ornaments at Christmas time, but I think they make great little, I don't know, anywhere. You can hang them over light switches. You can hang them from the rearview mirror in your car. I think they're fun year round. I teach weaving workshops. I have an online version, which is it's a virtual woven pillow course. It's $195. That it's something that you can buy on my website. And we do Zoom sessions. I've got recorded tutorials that you can watch to learn how to do the basic tapestry weaving, and then learn how to take that tapestry off the loom and stitch it onto a pillowcase. And everything you need comes in a kit that you get mailed to you. And then you can watch the tutorials ahead of time or throughout the course of the weekend. And then I schedule these Zoom sessions where you can get on and we weave together and people can ask questions. It's better if you've watched the tutorials and then you're asking questions after the fact. But the last time I did that, everyone just really picked up on the tutorials, didn't really have any questions. We just kind of got to chat and weave together for an hour or so. But all that to say, I really enjoyed setting up those workshops, even virtually. So now, starting in May, in my store, I have in-person workshops available. So there's a handful of dates that we put on the calendar for May. And basically, you can go online at reinvintagewarehouse.com under the shop tab, and you can go to our in-person classes. You can pick the weaving workshop that you're interested in, and then sign up for the date and time that work best for you. So that has been really, really fun. I love to teach other people how to weave. Like I said, it's been a very meditative process for me. I've just really, really enjoyed my time, working on different projects. And I love teaching other people how to do the same thing, because it's just a great meditative practice. I feel like doing something with your hands. Yeah, you do, Sherry. You're not too terribly far away. You could certainly come one day. All right. So there's some loops with our chiffon. So again, we're just getting all these different textures. So we've got this here. Now I think it's time to add some more of our art yarn. Okay. I should have earmarked. There it is. I was about to say I should have earmarked where I pulled it from earlier. Okay. So for this section, again, to just kind of get some different levels, I think I'm going to just do a basic over under to really try to let those scrap pieces sort of shine. This is going to be such a fun piece. I was talking about I used to keep all of these smaller ones for me for my wall. It'll be really hard not to keep this one. I love the way it's turning out. So if you're watching this video and you're enjoying it and you haven't already, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button. Tomorrow, our next podcast episode with Renee Smith of Rain Gardens and Rainy Day Vintage will be coming out. And you can watch that in our interview playlist if you were watching this at any other time. So it is May 3rd, 2022. And we are adding this new Makers Create Live segment every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. here live on YouTube. I'm going to have different podcast guests joining me tonight. You get to hang out with me and hear more about my craft and what I do. But next week, we'll have Michelle Allen with My Shell Bell Creations. And then on Wednesday mornings is when you will see the new episodes of the Makers Chat podcast here on the YouTube channel. That's a weekly podcast. Sometimes I'm interviewing creatives and sometimes I am sharing business tidbits for creative business owners. Handmade businesses are really, really gaining popularity as more and more people discover that they really enjoy working with their hands and digging into their creative side. So I want to make sure that as many people as possible have what they need in order to make their passions a business. And that's what Makers Chat is really all about, is getting to know the creatives who have started their own businesses, hear their stories, hear about what they've learned, and then learn what you need to learn so that you can take your business to the level that it'll let you do what you want to do. Whether that is just create some hobby income or whether that is to, replace a full-time job so that you can spend your days creating. Okay. Ended up being a pretty dense stretch there, but we'll just pack that down and pack that in, and we'll have some more black that will run around out there. That's cool. All right. So it is 8:38. So I chatted for a little bit. So this isn't a solid 38 minutes. We're probably talking more like 30 minutes. So I'm probably going to be able to have this finished in another 30 to 40 minutes. That's not too bad. Not too bad at all. I really love the way the texture is coming together and all of this. So when I get done with it, I will definitely be sure to share a picture on the Makers Chat Instagram. So if you're not already following us there, be sure to head over. If you're on Facebook, you can join us inside the Makers Chat community. I will go back and add all of that information in the description. So if you watched this video, thank you so much for hanging out with us in this very first kickoff party session of the Makers Create Live. We will be back here next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock with Michelle Allen from My Shell Bell Creations. So you guys have a great week.